I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America, Can We Talk? Today, we're going to talk about the PolitiChicks, Everyone Can Do Something, Newsom's Communist Reveal, that'd be California Governor Newsom, Bernie loves Castro, the 2020 congressional races, and Patriot Philip Haney gone. And I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
I am America, one voice, united we stand.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth.
Hello again and welcome to America Can We Talk and to today's First Five. I'm Debbie Georgatos. This past Thursday, so the last day of my show, last Thursday, we hosted an event in our home for a group called the PolitiChicks. And if you recognize that name kind of faintly, they were a group that became very, very active during the time of Andrew Breitbart, during the time of the rise of the Tea Parties. And it was really also coinciding, of course, with the Obama administration and the growing alarm around America about the left-leaning nature of the Obama administration, how the Obama administration was clearly heading America toward socialized medicine, big government control, and just scary things. And so what happened at that era when people recognized how extremely radically leftist President Obama was that patriots around this country became involved. Many people who hadn't been involved in politics at all became involved for the first time. Andrew Breitbart was one of those advocates at that time who was calling for essentially what he said was citizen journalism. The idea that we can't just wait to have the politicians, the candidates, the elected officials telling us what truth is, and that we actually could not even trust the media to tell us what truth is. That we, patriots in America, people of all backgrounds in this country who love this precious country, needed to organize, rise up, and be part of protesting against the larger, big picture direction of this country. That was what the Tea Party movement was about. That was what Andrew Breitbart was about. And a group emerged at that time called the PolitiChicks. It's actually two women, one named Anne Marie Murrell and the other named Morgan Brittany. Both of them had been in Hollywood. Both of them were actresses. And both of them were in a world, because they're in Hollywood, surrounded by leftists, surrounded by people who very much embraced what President Obama was doing to this country. When we had the car company bailouts, and we had the mortgage bailouts, and we had the growing power of the federal government, all sorts of arenas in American life, people in Hollywood, leftists, were cheering it on, but not everyone. There was a small cabal of conservatives in Hollywood who met in secret and talked about their support for the founding ideas of America, the founding ideas of liberty and personal responsibility, and the right of people to live in freedom. These people got more and more involved. So at our home last Thursday, the PolitiChicks, again, Anne Marie Murrell and Morgan Brittany, they were part of the Hollywood cabal that said, we're not going to just surrender to what President Obama is doing to this country. They joined the movement to speak up for America. And the way they did it, they told these stories at our home last week, and it was really fun to hear them. But Anne Marie Murrell went to some secret meeting of Hollywood conservatives where they had Andrew Breitbart come in and speak. And he talked to them about the idea, you have to be a citizen journalist. And he actually said, you've got to get out. And this is the first picture. I want to show the two ladies. So Andrew Breitbart, who, as you likely know, sadly passed away at a very young age. And then on the right is Anne Marie Murrell. She's one of the two founders of PolitiChicks. The other founder is named Morgan Brittany. And here's her picture. She is a Hollywood, when you read her resume, she has been in movies, not kidding, since she was 5 years old. She was in The Birds, Hitchcock's The Birds. She was in Hollywood for 57 years. So these two, though, banded together, and they basically, beyond being the citizen journalist, Anne Marie Murrell, she said she went home and bought a video camera and just started going to some of the Tea Party protests and the people protesting against Obamacare and protesting against the federal government's growing power. And she said she wasn't actually that comfortable doing it, but she got a hold of the microphone. She had a recording microphone. She had her video camera, and she just said, hey, excuse me, microphone in someone's face. Why are you here? She said 99% of the people were happy to talk while they were there. And then she started going to asking the same kind of questions to people who were on the left. Why are you here? What do you believe in? Why do you stand up? Why are you standing up for the leftist policies? What is it you believe? The two of them formed PolitiChicks, and they basically just became this phenom during that era and still to today of speaking up for conservative ideas, pointing out in particular, because they know a lot about it, Hollywood's role in not just supporting candidates and elected officials, but Hollywood's role in distorting, contorting, and destroying the American culture, the American family. The idea that Hollywood's images, what they depict as normal, reasonable behavior, which for most of human history we all knew is not normal and reasonable behavior, how they, and through their films and movies and storylines, seem to be almost advocating for the destruction of the nuclear family. They talk about many, many issues. They're still active. They actually got on board when President Trump was candidate Trump, and they went to a rally and warmed up the campaign rally for President Trump, I believe, for now President Trump. I believe it was in Nashville. They were telling their story. Only 200 people. But they kind of got the idea this guy gets what America is. So anyway, very entertaining to have them at our home, to get to interview them. But also the reason I want to share this with you in the show today is they're really an example of what I want to talk about a lot in our show today, which is the idea that every individual American, every one of you listening, every individual American has power to shape the American political conversation, to do your part to bring America back from, what we were under, we had under President Obama, to speak up for the direction America is now headed under President Trump, to point out the danger of the policies the American left is supporting, especially the policies brought to us, most sadly, by Bernie Sanders, who is apparently going to become the Democrats' nominee. We'll get to him a little while today. But that, my friends, is today's First Five. I want to turn and talk to you about a speech. I'm going to guess many of you didn't even know it happened, but in California, Governor Newsom, the Democrat governor of California, gave his State of the State speech. Kind of like when the president gives a State of the Union speech in Congress. Most states, maybe every state, but California has the governor give a State of the State presentation. So he spoke in the Capitol, and California, of course, has become radically left. And you can, by the way, if you want to hear this whole speech, you can go to our website, americacanwetalk.org. On the homepage, under list of links, you can click on and listen to the entire speech by Governor Newsom. I just want to tell you what I want to grab out of his speech and talk to you about today in terms of how starkly and just undeniably radically left the Democrat Party is today. What Gavin Newsom's topic was, he focused on homelessness and what the Democrat government of the state of California. So he's governor, he's Democrat, the entire Senate. I mean, there's no one in power, to summarize, no one in power in the state of California who's Republican. Zero. The state is utterly run by the Democrat Party. And I should have mentioned when we started, by the way, Matt, the extremely wonderful producer, is out sick, and so we have a substitute producer today. Derek Kaufman's here, helping me out, and I really appreciate that, getting the show rolling. And so we're going to I want to play the clip, Derek, the wonderful, of what Governor Newsom had to say in his State of the State speech about what California is going to do about homelessness. Here you go.
The state of California can no longer treat homelessness and housing insecurity as someone else's problem, buried below, other priorities that are much easier to win or better suited for sound bites. It's our responsibility, and it must be the top of our agenda. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. This year we have proposed CalAIM. It's a once-in-a-lifetime reform of our Medi-Cal system based on the obvious, long-ignored principle that physical health and brain health are inextricably linked. After all, 10 million Californians, 1 in 4 suffer from some type of behavioral health condition. This is not a narrow issue, nor a new one. The deeper truth is that our healthcare system, though, has been designed to treat some of our parts, not the sum of our parts. And that must change. This landmark proposal This landmark proposal calls for leveraging Medi-Cal as a tool to help California's most vulnerable residents, the homeless, our children, and people cycling in and out of the criminal justice system. It's about integrating care, targeting social determinants of health, and expanding our whole-person care pilots statewide. Healthcare and housing can no longer be divorced. After all, what's more fundamental to a person's well-being than a roof over their head? Doctors should be able to write prescriptions for housing the same way they do for insulin and antibiotics. Why not? That's the aim of CalAIM, transforming our Medi-Cal system as we know it, and we backed it up with a $695 million budget request to make it real this year.
Friends, that is the scariest speech imaginable, and I want you to really think about what he is saying. This is not some goofball Occupy Wall Street person rambling away in some, homeless camp about how doctors ought to be able to prescribe a home as a prescription for someone who comes to see them. This is the governor of California, the arguably most or second most powerful Democrat governor in the country, maybe with Cuomo, the two of them, Cuomo. But these two, this guy, Gavin Newsom, is saying that the government ought to be able to permit a doctor to give a prescription. So it's necessary medication. That's what prescriptions are. Necessary medication, necessary care. A doctor ought to be able to prescribe a home for someone who comes in as his patient. You have to recognize how radical and how dangerous this idea is. Of course, on the surface, you say, well, gosh, they're homeless, so of course they need a home. That's the definition of homelessness. That's why they, that this would solve their homelessness, because then they would have a home. Understand, first of all, when you have a Democrat Party lurching forward at breakneck speed, trying to take complete control of the healthcare system in this country, complete control. When the Democrats tell you Medicare for all, they like that term because Medicare sounds nice. It sounds friendly. It sounds like they're caring about people. They're talking about complete governmental control over the entire healthcare system. So they have that in place, or if they were to get that in place. And then they say, look what doctors should be able to prescribe. Far beyond necessary antibiotics or insulin, they should be able to prescribe everything any person needs to make them whole. So, for example, a doctor could prescribe a home. How about transportation or a car? How about someone needs to have a better education? So a doctor could say, for their mental health, they need better education. And you have to understand, the power of the prescription means that the doctor, backed by this new Medicare for All program they want, the state will have not only the ability, but the duty, the responsibility to permit that prescription to be fulfilled. Other portions of this speech, he talked about the idea that we need to radically change our policy with respect to mental illness. And, you may know we had big changes in the American system dealing with mental illness a few years ago. And part of the change was we said that you could not involuntarily force an individual into mental health care unless he or she is a danger to himself or others. And the idea was, and it was partly done because people were recognizing it's very easy to make the accusation against a senior citizen, against a wealthy person, against someone you want to have locked up, to say, oh yeah, they have mental health problems. They really do. And so you end up with people incarcerated practically in the mental health system. And the idea of the reform was saying, if you're not, actually physically dangerous to yourself or others, we can't involuntarily lock you up. Governor Newsom saying, nah, we ought to be able to be a little more forceful. Just drag these people off the streets. Look, I'm the first to say we have a big homeless problem in this country. And it did not come because President Trump is president. He even acknowledged this in another portion of the speech. It's, both parties have been involved. It's been an evolving problem over the years. But we're at this point that homelessness is a problem in California. It's also aggressive homelessness. It's not just people living on the streets. It's people aggressively confronting law-abiding, hardworking, tax-paying citizens as they try to drive to work, as they walk the streets of the city, and be aggressive about demanding money, physically aggressive about demanding, I need food, I need this, I need that. And so we do have to deal with those problems. I think it's a little scary when you have a leftist governor and a leftist candidate for president, we'll talk about Bernie in a few minutes, urging this Medicare for all, this government control of the healthcare system, urging that people must be incarcerated in a mental institution. They wouldn't use incarcerated, they'd say, cared for, providing care they really need. But you're going to start letting them expand the definition of who gets to be locked up involuntarily. Scary idea. I mean, I think we have to address homelessness, but not in ways that have too much potential to infringe on the freedom of the individual. And I'll tell you the other, in fact, there was a great quote, I don't know if I'll find it in time, but Ronald Reagan or somebody had this idea, or this point to make, that you have, socialism, which is really what Gavin Newsom is talking about. It's just socialism, taking care of everything for everybody. Socialism cannot prescribe, cannot take care of, cannot supply, cannot solve the problems that led to homelessness to start with. I mean, you think about the homeless population in California and everywhere in our country. We're talking about mental health problems, we're talking about drug addiction, we're talking about alcohol problems, we're talking about all sorts of problems, that many of which the homelessness is a result of those problems. Some people are homeless because they had really down in the luck times, they had a hard situation in life and lost all their money and don't happen to have a family. I mean, they really are people like that too. But the idea of a government beginning to swoop up everyone they find troublesome in the homeless population, put them involuntarily into mental health institutions, is a very scary solution. And back this idea of what government can and cannot do. Much of homelessness is due to people who lost their way in life. They become addicted, they become mentally ill, they have become hopeless, they become full of fear, and all that socialist solutions by big government people like Newsom can do is fix the problem. Maybe they can build enough housing. Maybe they can build enough mental health facilities. Maybe they can advance and fund enough care for people with addictions. But the real problems that lead to homelessness in a vast number of cases is the idea of you lost your sense of personal, individual sense of worth, of self-worth, of purpose, of the idea that you have a place in this world, and that comes from faith. That notion that reinstilling in the individual belief in himself, belief there's a higher power available and with you and able to help you through life and guide you through life. None of the emotional problems that can lead to homelessness are ever fixed by the physical solution the government can impose on you or provide for you, which is incarceration and mental institution, drug and alcohol care, buying housing for people and just flooding people into homeless shelters. Socialism as a problem solver in the world cannot really solve the problems that truly come from a more personal sense of loss, a sense of identity, purpose, a sense of faith, a sense that there's a more in this world than just you all alone, that there actually is a creator among us who cares for us. The deeper solutions that lead to happiness and mental stability come from higher answers than socialist government simply providing more housing, more forced care, more forced incarceration in mental health institutions, or more care for your addiction problems or alcohol problems. But the idea, I want to go back to Governor Newsom and wrapping up this segment. If you picture what this guy is talking about, a massive increase in funding and focus in the mental health world in California to deal with homelessness, it gets us to 20 steps ahead in the George Orwell worry. We used to talk about Orwell in 1984 and how the government will control everything. He talks about correcting people whose thought is off. It's a scary, scary thought, and yet to him, the idea of fixing homelessness by having government-controlled health care, mandated. You can't get out of it. You can't ignore it. And then you have doctors with the ability to prescribe what he was saying, prescribe a home. A doctor should be able to prescribe a home for someone in the same way they can prescribe, I guess he used insulin or some kind of antibiotic. Doctors prescribing everything you need. Doctors paid by the federal government. Doctors controlled by the federal government. Doctors deciding what everyone needs way beyond the physical health of the body. And doctors empowered because we're in their worldview. We'll get to Medicare for all. We'll get to government-controlled society. Doctors will be in charge of everything. And the idea that society can say, hey, wait a minute, why should we have to pay for a home for this person who isn't trying to improve his life, isn't trying to move forward in life, isn't trying to become capable of working, isn't trying to heal his problems, isn't trying anything. So instead we're going to say, instead of solving his problems, we're just going to have a doctor prescribe for him a home and the rest of society has to pay for it. These are, I don't even know, I'll probably have more discussion about this topic throughout this week and next week going forward. But Gavin Newsom, in his State of the State speech in California, really gave America a window on how radical and extreme and dangerous the American left is today. If you're going to have government-controlled health care, doctors controlled by government, and doctors can prescribe anything they think you need, and the rest, that would mean necessarily the taxpayers pay for it, we are way beyond the worst fears George Orwell ever had. We'll come back to him more, but that's the end of talking about him today. Gavin Newsom, I just think you ought to listen to his speech and recognize where these people would take us if only we would let them. But I want to turn and talk about Bernie Sanders. Okay, first of all, you likely saw Bernie Sanders resoundingly won the Nevada caucus. I think the final numbers, he had 47% or something like that. And the next highest was Biden at 21 or 23. So Bernie Sanders is well on his way to winning the Democrat nomination for the presidency. I want to talk about him today because what he's talking about, if you think Gavin Newsom is a tiny bit scary, you need to recognize who Bernie Sanders is, what he's talking about, what he's saying that he will do. Let me start with, he did an interview. Bernie Sanders was interviewed over the weekend out by Anderson Cooper on CNN. He was extremely friendly in his remarks about Castro, about first Fidel Castro in Cuba, and continuing today, talking about what a great revolution. He is very much praising and supporting Cuba and communist dictator Castro. Now, as he got pressed a little bit by Anderson Cooper, he's trying to back off. Bernie Sanders is trying to back off and say, well, let's be really careful about this revolution word. That's kind of, and Anderson Cooper said, you're the one using it. You're the one saying, yeah, revolution. You want a revolution. I want to just tell you a little bit about, if you didn't know enough about Bernie Sanders' background, to understand how scary it is when he says he wants to bring a revolution to America. To start with, you likely know he, Bernie Sanders, was the mayor of Burlington, Vermont. He pretty much had no job and no income and no skills and never participated in the private workforce like the vast number of Americans do. He managed, a lunatic-level communist, managed to get elected as the mayor of Burlington, Vermont in 1981 and served in that role till 1989. So he was 8 years mayor of Burlington, Vermont. During the 1980 presidential elections, so he's just about to become mayor of Burlington, so he's a Democrat Party official, although I guess he probably ran as a socialist. Democrats are working away in 1980 to get Jimmy Carter reelected, but mayor of Burlington, Vermont, Bernie Sanders, supported Andrew Pulley, the Communist Party's nominee. Actually, they call it SWP, Socialist Workers Party. It's the Communist Party. SWP is their acronym, Socialist Workers Party. So, first of all, Bernie Sanders supported in 1980 a guy named Andrew Pulley, who was the communist candidate for president. Well, all the rest of the Democrats are trying to reelect Jimmy Carter in the ridiculous miasma, and the economy was in ruins, everything was a mess, foreign policy was a mess, but Democrats are still working. Sanders went to support Andrew Pulley, and in the course of supporting him, Sanders said in 1980, while supporting this guy, Andrew Pulley, I fully support the SWP's continued defense of the Cuban Revolution. I got to tell you, this is going to cost him, by the way, his continued support of Castro, cost him some votes in the Florida Cuban population, because Florida is full of Cubans who escaped communism, who don't want to hear anything about this from the incoming president. 1984, 4 years later, Bernie Sanders, still governor of Burlington, Vermont. 4 years later, the entire Democrat Party working like crazy to try to support Walter Mondale, their candidate for president in 1984. Bernie Sanders was supporting presidential nominee Mel Mason. Mel Mason, former Black Panther, and in the course of his campaign, he was saying it was important for there to be fundamental alternatives to capitalist ideology. And Mason, this candidate that Bernie Sanders supported in '84, praised the Russian and Chinese revolutions and said the greatest example of a socialist government is Cuba. And Nicaragua is right behind, but it's still developing. Even when Bernie Sanders ran for mayor of Burlington, Vermont, he ran on platforms such as, actually, he ran for governor of Vermont, but he was mayor, then he ran for governor, ran on platform of nationalizing the energy industry, public ownership of banks, telephone, electric, and drug companies. So this is Bernie Sanders, his platform, when he ran for governor. Drug companies and of the major means of production. So he wants government ownership of all those things I just mentioned. This is Bernie Sanders. This is not back when he was a, goofball radical in college and maybe he hadn't figured out life yet. He was well into his 40s, I think in his 50s, while he was saying these things. He supported nationalization of energy, public ownership of banks, telephone, electric, and drug companies, and the major means of production, such as factories and capital, as well as other proposals such as a 100% income tax, 100% income tax on the highest income earners in America. He has all the communist lingo down. He wants to create a situation in which the ordinary working people take what rightfully belongs to them. And he also talked about that time if workers, the communist term, if workers do not take power in a reasonably short time, this country will not have a future. I mean, the guy has been a radical communist his whole life. I was reading about his childhood when I don't have all the information in front of me, but one thing that I read about his childhood was his dad was also a completely unemployable loser, could not hold a job, kept losing jobs, and would lament at home about the horrible economic system in America. No wonder we have problems, because we have, and was also a radical socialist, was arguing for, the government's got to take control of this, and the government's got to fix this and prevent that. So Bernie Sanders is now apparently on track to become the Democrats' nominee for president. He's making many people very nervous, many people. But I want to get at something, two other points, and I'll turn to my next topic. But I want to, there was a video, and I don't have it ready today. I could play it, but a video of Bernie Sanders talking back in the 1980s. And he was saying he didn't like the authoritarian nature of Cuba. Of course, that was wrong. They shouldn't be so authoritarian. But, they had massive literacy. They had health care for all, and it was free. And, he was trying to straddle a fence and say, I really don't like Cuba's coercion, but I want the government to do everything that he or the socialists and communists think the government should do. Well, the government can only do that through coercion. Hardworking people do not simply volunteer their money, volunteer their fruit of their labor, their hard work, their family savings, and give it to the government because some nut job came along and decided to try socialism in America. So it was actually for Anderson Cooper, who is a CNN leftist. Even Anderson Cooper was trying to press him a little bit and say, he pointed out to him, by the way, 2/3 of the Democrats in the Senate have not signed on for Medicare for all. In fact, I want to read you this little vignette, this exchange between Anderson Cooper and Bernie Sanders, he who would be your president in a mere 10 months. So Anderson Cooper's asking him, you don't have the Democrats signing on. The cost is at least $30 to $40 trillion just for the first 10 years. 30 to 43 trillion. That's just one of your proposals. And you have, free public college, cancellation of all student debt, federal job guarantee, a Green New Deal to basically take over the entire energy industry and destroy the fossil fuel industry. So Anderson Cooper says to him, so how much would that cost, Bernie Sanders, you who would be president? Which Sanders says, well, obviously those are expensive propositions, but we have done our best on issue after issue in paying for them. We basically say, well, we're going to pay for them somehow. Cooper says, how much though? Do you have a price tag for all of this? So Sanders tries to answer with, well, I think it's about 30 trillion. Anderson Cooper, but Bernie, that's just your Medicare for all, right? Oh yeah, that's just Medicare for all. How about all the rest? Price tag for all these things. And then he finally said, he says, no, you mentioned making public colleges and universities tuition free and canceling all student debt. That's correct. That's what I want to do. And we're going to pay for that through a modest tax on Wall Street. People, this is insanity level. This is like talking to a 5-year-old who wants daddy to have 5 mansions, 3 cars, and all the amenities that wealthy people have, and just is saying, I don't care if our family can't afford it, I want it. And this Bernie Sanders is, for all of the reality that he has served as the mayor of Burlington, Vermont, he served in Congress, he served as a U.S. Senator, and is a U.S. Senator, he has the reasoning, the logic, the mindset of a juvenile, demanding, outraged child. And every time someone points out to him, this has never worked anywhere, and look at Cuba and look at Venezuela, he's still, even though he says, I don't like the authoritarianism of the Cuban system, he's still praising Castro. I'll tell you one last point about these millennials, because we're going to be, if Bernie Sanders, is our presidential candidate, our job, not just the candidates, not just elected officials, not just party officials, the job of every American who sees the danger of Bernie Sanders, it's our job to make that danger clear to the average Joe American. Because I'm telling you what's happening with these young people, these millennials, and college kids are all behind Bernie Sanders. It's just so exciting. We're going to have a revolution. We're going to stand up. We're going to make life fair for everybody. None of them think it will change their life at all. None of them. They all think it's somebody else's money that will be taken away. I have story after story I could tell you from public speaking, from family stories, everyone getting behind Bernie Sanders thinking, Bernie Sanders platform, Bernie Sanders campaign, are thinking all the money that's going to pay for all this free stuff is coming from somebody else. Somebody else, not me. And so my life will be the same. I'll go to work, I'll get my paycheck, I'll come home, I'll buy my groceries, I'll pay my rent or my mortgage, I'll have a car, I'll have my clothes, I'll have my health care, everything will be, and nothing about me will change. And even after people point out, but actually, if you tried to even get close to even some of the proposals that Bernie Sanders has made, everyone in the country will pay more taxes. Everyone. You can't get there on taxing the rich or on Wall Street or on all the other crazy ideas he throws out. But young people don't see that. I don't mean just young people. There are plenty of people, frankly, of all ages, getting behind the delusion that Bernie Sanders is painting for them, that somehow everything in life you need can be free, everything can be free, and it won't cost you anything. The government will just give it to people. And as we all know, many times it's been pointed out, no such thing as a free lunch. And when the government promises to pay for something, what they're really promising is to take money away from other people. The government, Bernie Sanders is promising taxpayer money, individual Americans' money, to pay for the promise he's making to other individual Americans. The government has no money. It's never had any money. It doesn't have money. It only has available expenditures because it's taken money away from the American people. But this seems to be lost on many people supporting Bernie Sanders. And that's a good segue into time. A very quick little segment. I want to talk about the 2020 congressional races again, very briefly. I told you last week I moderated a debate between, there are 5 candidates in the GOP primary in the district I live in, which is a congressional district in Texas. We had a Republican many years. He lost in 2018. We now have a Republican primary. 5 people running for that seat. Every single congressional race, first of all, I assume you know, every single seat in the U.S. Congress is up, open every 2 years. Not open, but there is an election every 2 years for members of Congress. Every 2 years. And every member of Congress must sit for re-election. That's just in the Constitution, thank God. But in that process of electing people to represent them in Congress, there are something like 73% of the seats are just owned by one party, meaning, the incumbent is going to win or a challenger to that incumbent is going to win. The point is, it's not really like there's a robust debate of ideas in every congressional district around this country. There just isn't. There's party that owns a certain seat, and because of the way the seat is drawn, because of the composition of the constituents in that area. So in the areas where we have competitive elections like mine, we have 5 people running for the GOP primary. Every single seat, and not just in seats like mine, all 435 seats, that's how many people are on Congress, all of them should be a national election. Every one of those seats should be about a national election between, are we going to hold on to freedom, or are we going to surrender to Bernie Sanders and socialism? Because I have to tell you, folks, if the U.S. House goes Democrat or stays Democrat, or they increase the Democrat control, and if the Senate tips to Democrat control, and if Bernie Sanders wins because of these ninny never-Trumpers staying home and saying, well, I can't vote for Trump because I don't like his tweets. If you have Bernie Sanders in the White House, retain Democrat control of the House, and the Senate goes to Democrat control, we will be in a world of hurt. We will be in a dangerous, dangerous place in this country, because Bernie Sanders means it when he tells you, when he tells America in his debates that he is a socialist. He's a communist. He would happily put everything he wants to do in place while president, and as Barack Obama did when he put Obamacare in place, he intentionally made it nearly impossible to repeal. It was written in a way with entangled regulations and numerous interconnectedness between a variety of agencies, made it almost impossible to repeal it. This is what Bernie Sanders will do with every policy that he wants to push. He will make America socialist. This is the issue of 2020. Socialists are very happy to be in complete control of society, to take away your health care freedom, to take away your free speech freedom, to take away your religious freedom. They're happy to abandon borders because the ultimate notion of the globalists is worldwide socialism. We're the ones standing on the wall. We're the ones saying, no, we actually want a place where freedom exists in this world. That's what is at stake in 2020. And so if you are living in a district and it's a close district where you could possibly have a Republican take out a Democrat, could possibly have a Republican win a seat back from a Democrat, do not get sidetracked into discussing, the various picayune distinctions between the primary candidates and how you don't like candidate X very well because, you don't like his mother, or one time I heard this happen to him, or one time I heard he said this or did this. You got to pick your primary candidate, but whoever wins the primary and is the Republican candidate in every district in this country, knock yourself out to get them elected. Understand, this 2020 election, Bernie Sanders is popular. And that reminds me of something I want to tell you about that. I talk to people, I do a lot of public speaking, talk to people all the time. People are always saying, oh my gosh, Trump is going to win in a landslide. Trump's going to win in a landslide. What are you even worried about? Everyone loves him. Look how big his rallies are. People, I will remind you, Trump is popular. Many people on the Republican side who didn't like him so well in 2016 are totally on board in 2020. But understand, what happens in politics is that we talk to our own choir. You probably talk to your friends who also like Donald Trump, who are also supporting him and saying, this is great, what a great guy. Well, Democrats do the same thing. Democrats who, especially the Trump haters, which is mostly all Democrats, they talk to their colleagues. They cannot even imagine that Trump would win again. They saw his victory in 2016 as a fluke. I mean, Hillary won the popular vote, for crying out loud. They think that getting rid of Trump is a given. The Democrats think this. This is why Sanders makes them a little bit nervous, because he's so extreme. But I'm getting at the point, do not get comfortable, do not get cozy thinking, look how popular Trump is, and look at our unemployment numbers, and the economy is soaring, everything's great, of course Trump will win again. This election, the radical left has everything on the line in 2020. They've finally become honest and acknowledged that their candidate is a Democrat socialist, and that's who they're going to put up in this 2020 election cycle. I remember back when Reagan was running the second time, so it was 1984, and I remember talking to a friend of mine who's very liberal, big Democrat, and she lived in California. She was telling me how, she said something about everybody she knew, everyone she knew was going to vote for Mondale. Mondale was going to win. Everyone she knew was going to vote for him. And she said, I don't know a single person, and she meant this. She didn't know a single person who was going to vote for Reagan. And I said, I don't know a single person who is going to vote for Mondale. And I really didn't, because my world was people who think like I do. But I'm telling you, there are a world of people out there who need to have their eyes opened about what Bernie Sanders and a Democrat majority in the House and Senate would do to America. You wouldn't recognize this country in 4 years. Holding on to the House, winning the House back, having a Republican majority in the House, a Republican majority that can, because they hold the purse strings, they're the ones who can say no to most of what Bernie Sanders would try to get through Congress. Now, if Sanders wins, he's going to have a lot of executive orders, and you're not going to like one of them. But at least if we hold on to the U.S. House, we can block spending. We, the patriots, the people who don't want our country to become socialist. So I want to wrap up this segment by saying it's extremely important to get Republicans to turn out in this congressional race in 2020. You got to get behind whoever the Republican candidate is in your district, who wins the primary, whoever it is, no matter what you think of that person, you have to get behind them. Because we need to retake the House. We need to block the potential of a President Bernie Sanders doing to America what socialism and communism did to Cuba and Venezuela. And that, my friends, one more quick topic for today. I want to talk to you about Philip Haney. I have a picture of him. I sent my substitute producer, who's very wonderful, Derek. This is a picture of Philip Haney. If you recognize him, he's actually been on our show before, and he is was actually at our home. We did an event, and he spoke at an event in our home. I want to just tell you briefly about him and play a short tribute. I think some people are going to give a longer tribute today, but Philip Haney passed away last Friday, or his body was discovered last Friday. He died of a gunshot wound to the chest. Philip Haney was among the original people back in November of 2002 that was part of the founding of DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, happening just a year after the attacks of 9/11. And so a year later, the federal government created DHS to have more coordination among the national agencies that protect us. So he was part of that founding of the DHS. But I want to tell you what a unique character he is. It kind of ties back to my first segment today. I was talking about the PolitiChicks, of the vital need for people in this country to stand up for the country, to speak up, to take risks. In fact, that was one thing Andrew Breitbart told Anne Marie Murrell. Figure out what you believe in, speak up, and be fearless. Philip Haney, whom I'm acknowledging right now, he worked for the Department of Homeland Security. He wrote the book, See Something, Say Nothing. He basically talked about in his book that during the time, once the Obama administration came along, after the founding of the Department of Homeland Security, that he saw the Obama administration putting Islamists, people who not only follow the Muslim faith, but are Islamists, who are dedicated and determined to imposing Islam and its ugly, barbaric law, Sharia, determined to impose Islam and Sharia on America. Haney was a whistleblower extraordinaire. He spoke up about what happened during the Obama era at the Department of Homeland Security, talking about how the left, he talked about the red-green axis, the idea that the left in this country, the radical left, which Bernie Sanders is part of, and many on the left are, had locked arms with the Islamists in this country, the people committed not just to their faith, Islam, but committed to imposing Islam and Sharia on America, whether we liked it or not. So he was not popular during the Obama era. He spoke up about how the Obama era was coddling Islam, placing Islamists, dangerous people in high positions in the government. So because he did this, he was hassled during his time at the Department of Homeland Security. He was transferred numerous places, repeated job actions, investigations, threats. He was hassled by the Obama team because he was speaking up about how friendly they were to the Islamists. He was subjected to 9 different investigations of his behavior, all because the Obama administration was trying to silence him, as he was pointing out how cozy the Obama administration and the radical left in this country are with the radical Muslims who would happily impose Sharia by force on all of us. Only for the great work of Congressman Louis Gohmert, who was on our show last week, was he actually cleared of all of those accusations, false accusations by the Obama people, had his full retirement restored, and was actually reportedly going to be going back to work for Ken Cuccinelli at the Homeland Security when he was, as I say, died last week by a gunshot wound to his chest. Some media arguing it was self-inflicted, others saying no, this was a hit job by the who knows what it was, unknown what was the source of his being killed. But anyway, I want to give great tribute to Philip Haney, a truly, truly brave American. And now, my friends, I want to turn to talk to you about why the stories we talked about today matter to you. So we'll start with the first story, the PolitiChicks, and this is a great line by Breitbart: everyone can do something. PolitiChicks are a part of the legacy of Andrew Breitbart. No one can do everything, but everyone can do something. You see what's happening to America. You know it's wrong. You must not back away on the grounds. What can any one person do? Find your passion and apply your skills and assets. Go forward fearlessly. This is just 2020. It's America. The very identity of America is on the ballot in 2020. On the next slide, we had the story of Newsom's big communist reveal. And I use that reveal word very intentionally. You know, the idea that Newsom, he's telling you what the left will do if only you let them. They will end up with our government being controlled by the healthcare system is a means, it's a method, it's a way to get at controlling the American people, controlling the agenda. If a doctor can prescribe a home to a homeless patient, he can prescribe anything, and we have no freedom left. In his speech, California Governor Newsom, I want to go back to that one. Sorry about that, about Newsom. This was just I want to be sure and say accurately what he's been saying. But Newsom, there we go. Okay. Healthcare and housing, these are his words, can no longer be divorced. After all, what's more fundamental to a person's well-being than a roof over their head? Doctors should be able to write prescriptions for housing, which you people will pay for. American people will pay for. And so this idea, anyway, same way they do for insulin and antibiotics. Our healthcare system has been designed to treat some of our parts, and this is Newsom's language, instead of or not the sum, S-U-M, of our parts. This must change. In his State of the State, he called to address homelessness. Newsom revealed the totalitarian underbelly of socialized medicine. Government decides and defines what physical and mental health is, directs the masses to obey health directives, or else redistributes wealth for the sake of collective so-called health. on Bernie hearts Castro. Bernie stands up for Castro in a 60 Minutes interview. He says Castro had a literacy program. What's so bad about that? Literacy in Cuba was for the purpose of facilitating communist indoctrination. Sanders' support of Castro should not be surprising, but it should be alarming. He honeymooned in the Soviet Union and came back extolling his virtues. He has supported Chavez and Maduro in Venezuela. He openly speaks, even now, of revolution in America. Sanders, by his own words and actions, is an angry, anti-freedom, anti-free market, anti-God, anti-American socialist, and he appears headed to becoming the presidential nominee of one of the two major political parties in America. If Sanders secures the Democrat nomination, the 2020 choice will be starker and clearer than at any time in American history. And the 2020 congressional races, not one congressional election contest in America in 2020 should be about personalities, hairstyles, clothing, gender, skin color, or anything superficial. Every D incumbent and every D candidate will ultimately vote with Pelosi if the Democrats retain the House majority and she remains Speaker. And if Sanders wins, she or any other speaker they have will vote with Sanders' totalitarian socialist agenda. You got to understand, you'll have Democrats supporting this in the House. Do not delude yourself. There's some moderate Democrats out there who won't go along with Sanders. They'll go along with him. This must not happen to America. There's one choice for preserving America and American freedom, and that's to vote R across the country in every race, for an R House majority and an R Senate majority, and for an R president. And finally, Patriot Philip Haney, gone. Philip Haney was a founding member of the Department of Homeland Security. He bucked the Obama administration's agenda regarding the threat of Islam and Sharia in America. He saw it as very serious and deliberately pursued by Islamists within America. He pursued Islamists within America. He authored See Something, Say Nothing about struggles in the Obama administration. He was driven out of Obama's DHS, reportedly was headed back to Trump's DHS, died of a single gunshot wound to the chest. Speculation about suicide or murder, no conclusions yet. Philip Haney was an unsung hero, an American patriot with fierce enemies in the American deep state and among Islamist organizations. He did so much to help protect America. And that, my friends, is America Can We Talk for today. Thank you so much for tuning in every Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time, to America Can We Talk, where I always talk truth about America, because America matters. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Voice upon voice, like a crashing wave. Can you hear us now?
America Can We Talk? Truth about America.
Can you